So if that was the question, in your answer, you know f of x represents which alphabet? Y. So y is equal to 2 to the x. That's not the inverse function, that is the original. We now need to give the inverse. Inverse means the opposite. So swap x and y. Let's swap the x and y. So instead of y equals 2x plus 8, we're now going to say for your inverse function, what are we going to say? X is equal to 2y plus 8. So there we go. Right? If I give you rules, if I give you steps to do, I want you to follow it religiously, step by step. I'm not going to give you a rule and you're not going to be using it. Okay? So we swap the x and the y. So we swap the x and the y. What did I say? Step number 2, make y the subject of the formula. So what do we have now? We have 2y is equal to x plus 8 will go over as minus 8. We divide by 2. Remember, make y the subject of the formula. Divide by 2. It's an equation. What I do to one, I do to all. So y is equal to x over 2 is a half x minus, you can say x over 2, but we rather put it as half x minus 8 over 2 is 4. And they want it in the form f of minus 1. So f of minus 1x is equal to a half x minus 4. And there we go. That is the inverse function for 4 marks, the inverse function of that straight line. You will do it. It's a generic rule. Generic means it can be applied to anything. So take all your functions, whatever functions you have, right? If the minute they tell you, give the inverse function, swap the x and the y, make y the subject of the formula. That will be your new function. Now you sketch the function. Now, what happens, this is a typical grade 12 concept. Now grade 12s, I need you to pay attention here. Right? It comes in all your past papers. They now give you a graph, they give you a parabola that looks like that. Okay? Now, this is 0. They now tell you that this is graph f. Now, we know that f is a function. What is a function? A function is a one-to-one relation. For one x value, you must get one y value. One x value, one y value. Choose any x value. You'll get one corresponding y value. Now, what we're going to do, so you got one x value, so a one-to-one function, one-to-one is a function. A one-to-many is a relation. Meaning that if you got one x value and you got many y values, that is a relation. So, is this a function? Yes, it's a function. Why? For one x value, you got one corresponding y value, right? They're going to ask you in the exam. On the same, now you know that this is pointing to the positive y. They say on the same set of axes, draw the inverse function of f, in the called f of minus 1. So on the same set of axes, if this is pointing to the positive y, the inverse function is going to point to the positive x. So the graph is now going to go in that direction, and that is going to be called f of minus 1. Okay? If this graph was a negative function, for example, and that was the original graph, and they now said draw the inverse function, this graph is pointing down to the negative y, so obviously the inverse function will be pointing to the negative x, and that is f of minus 1. That is your inverse function, your opposite function. Okay, now they're going to ask you, is f of minus 1, is the inverse function of the original a function? Is f of minus 1 a function? And I know you're all sitting there in your lounges, or you're all sitting there watching the program, and 99% of all you grade 12s are already answering the question, no, it's not a function. Exactly, and you are 100% right. Right? You can't always be wrong. Okay, so we got no, it's not a function. Why is it not a function? Because for one x value, for one, if I do the straight line test, if I draw a straight line here, how many times does my straight line cut this? It cuts at once, cuts twice. So the inverse function is not a function. For one x value, I've got many y values. For one x value, I got many y values. So it's not a, is f of minus 1 a function? No, it's not a function. Why? Because it's a one-to-many relation. One-to-many relation. Meaning that for one x value, you've got many y values. Okay? How would you restrict? This is another exam question. How would you restrict the domain in order to make f of minus 1 a function? how would you restrict the domain in order to make this a function? So you're now going to say, if I close the bottom part of the inverse function, the top half is a function. If I close the top half, the bottom half is a function. So we're going to say for y greater than 0 or for y less than 0. And that is how we restrict the domain in order to keep this a function. Because if I close the bottom half, the top half, y greater than 0. If I close the top half, the bottom half is a function. So y greater than 0 or y less than 0. Okay?